From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 525. I'm Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. With me as always, my co-host Derek, DP3 in our forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, good to be talking to you as always. As we tip things off here, what's on your mind this week?
Andrew, there was a sad moment in my household last week, and I thought that this would be a good way to start out the show, and the topic being knowing when to put down an old favorite. So we decided to revisit NBA 2K17. As you know, we had been playing that game consistently for about 7 years. It was a weekly go-to. And it was, seasons, with my brother and I on the same team against the computer, both of my brothers on the same team against the computer, versus seasons, all of that. 7 years with one video game, Andrew. It was crazy. And we really loved NBA 2K17 during that time. But we went back to it and tried a co-op season last week, and we just weren't having much fun, Andrew. We were getting frustrated with some of the mechanics, with, the brick wall defense. Game felt a little bit heavy compared to the other games that we had been playing recently and whatnot. And we realized that it's time to officially move on, and that the game maybe for now, for us, had run its course. And we've been spending a lot of time recently, as you know, and as our listeners know, with NBA 2K19. And that is kind of just taken over NBA 2K17. It's become the go-to. It's become the co-op game. It's become the versus game. It's become the go-to on Parsec with Stildo and whatnot. So, yeah, knowing when to move on from an old favorite, and that moment is actually kind of sad, because you look back at the roster mods you created, the epic battles that you had, the videos that maybe you uploaded to YouTube, like the gameplay and whatnot. And it's great to have new fun with a different game, but it's also just kind of sad.
Oh, for sure. And I am surprised, because 2K17 is a game that we both hold in very high regard, and it is still a fantastic game. I'm sure you still ultimately feel that way, but I do know how you feel that when you have played a game for 7 years, and that is a long time to spend with any game, obviously, and when there are new games coming out every year, and you have such a diverse rotation, obviously, then, yeah, it's certainly understandable that you may get a little bit weary of it after all this time. But no, I get where you're coming from. It is definitely sad when you feel like, I've gotten all I can out of this game, and I love it so much, yet I feel sick of it. And you don't want to feel sick of it, do you? Because it is a fantastic game. You know it's a fantastic game. You know it's an all-time favorite, but you have to put it down. But that just means that when you come back to it, it's probably going to feel fresh and fun again.
And that's the goal, is, maybe a year or two down the road or whatnot, maybe you go back to it and it feels new again.
Sure.
And, the same thing actually happened with NBA 2K14 for the PC. Well, I think that, it's one of the greatest 2Ks of all time from a gameplay and depth perspective. Just absolutely love that game, both on PC and on Xbox One, PS4. But we had been playing the PC version of NBA 2K14 all the way up until NBA 2K17 was released. So what is that, 2.5 years, something like that, 3 years? And we had just created so many memories modding the game, starting seasons, having epic performances with certain players. Like, I'm pretty sure my brother Nick scored like 110 points with Julius Erving against my brother Mark, and it made my brother want to throw his controller, etc. So, like, we have all of those memories with that game. But when 2K17 came out, it was time to move on from that old favorite, from 2K14. And, when I revisited NBA 2K14 again recently after, a few years of not picking it up that much, it felt new and fun again, right? So maybe that will happen with 2K17. But do you have any examples in your basketball gaming history where you had been with an old favorite, maybe something like NBA Live 06, for a while, maybe a few years and whatnot, and you had played it religiously, and then one time you picked it up and you're like, it's time to move on?
Yeah, and actually NBA Live 06 was the first game that came to mind, because I do have that Chicago Bulls dynasty that has run for 2.5 years, or 2 and a little bit years at this time, and just kept picking it up again over the years after playing through that first season during the 2005-2006 season. And yeah, that would probably be my prime example of putting that aside for a while and picking it up again. And I haven't really picked it up again for a while, apart from playing with you and just for obviously getting screenshots for articles and maybe an exhibition game here and there. Haven't touched that Dynasty in a while. Again, I've been so hooked on the 2K14 PS4 my career that I haven't really spent time with other modes. It's mostly been exhibition games in other games that I feel like playing. But yeah, Live 06 would probably be a great example of that. And probably NBA Live 2004 as well. I would love to revisit that game and play with my 96 roster and actually try to play a Dynasty with that roster. As I said in a previous show, and it'll also be in an upcoming article, I did try to start a 96 season with that 96 roster mod in NBA Live 2004, or a Dynasty, actually, but only played a game or two and then just didn't go any further, and that save is long since gone. And that's heartbreaking as well, to lose saves over the years also, and I've done that too often, and I can't ever remember why. I'm guessing that I must have uninstalled a game at some point, or I've got a new computer and I haven't copied something over when I was much younger, or I've deleted it because I haven't thought I wanted to play it anymore, which is all on me. Ridiculous to think about. Now I make sure that I keep my saves as much as possible, and that is harder with the always online modes, of course. But yeah, probably Live 2004 and Live 06 would be the ones that I've abandoned and come back to, or gotten sick of and come back to. But obviously with other games, like a Fallout 3, like Fallout New Vegas, you play the hell out of them, you have a great time, but then you have to put them aside and let them become fresh again.
Yeah, I think the bonus that we have is that we have huge collections, right?
Sure.
So there's always a game for us to, go back to. There's always a new experience for us.
There's always a game
that give a second chance to even, and whatnot. So I'm thrilled that we're really into NBA 2K19. My brother Nick and I have started a classic teams roster project that we're doing. So I'm going to create cyber faces for it, and we're going to put in the teams that we want and mod in logos and courts and all of that stuff. It's not one that we're looking to release to the public. It's one that would be for personal use for me and my brothers. But yeah, jumping into a new modding project, having a more fresh experience with a game, all of that stuff. I recommend it to our audience. And that's the other reason why I wanted to bring this up. If you do feel kind of, down in the dumps about a game you've been playing for a long time, kind of like not exactly bored with it, but yes, bored with it, but more like you just need something new. Like, don't shut out that feeling. Like, maybe get a new basketball video game, right?
Yeah, listen to that feeling, yeah.
Yeah, listen to the feeling. Maybe attack a retro game that you had been thinking about attacking and you just never made time for it, right? Because you and whoever you play with, if you play with somebody, you could have a lot of fun with that new experience. But yeah, 2K17 is pretty much retired for now in my household, but we created a ton of memories with that game and no regrets.
Yeah, and that's the main thing, that you did enjoy it for so many years. 7 years out of a title is no mean feat. Playing it as often as you did and modding it, it's plenty of opportunity to get burned out. So the fact that it took this long, again, speaks to what a great game 2K17 was. And as we said before, people felt that way even at the time. This is not just nostalgia goggles. People did feel that 2K17 was a very strong release. I wrote that Friday 5 a few weeks ago, why I feel 2K17 is the best game in the series. It is the last traditional release before the whole neighborhood took over with my career, and it really kind of went towards that Fortnite with basketball direction.
Yeah, it's also the last 2K that was fair to the gamer.
Yes.
It was the last
absolutely.
one. The NBA 2K18 was the mega push with microtransactions.
Sign of things to come. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. But, these games come around. So, as you said, put them on the shelf, find something new, and I have actually fallen behind playing a new game every week. I need to get back to that. Have already played some fun ones this year. I mean, we just connected and played a fun one right today as we're recording.
Yeah, so that's the next thing we're going to discuss. So Andrew and I just had a few sessions on Virtua NBA, which is an NBA arcade game developed and published by Sega in either the year 2000, so January 2000, or on October 10th, 1999. There's definitely conflicting information out there, but it's within that 3 to 4 month span when this game was released. It used Sega Naomi, which is a system based on the Sega Dreamcast technology, to be used as a base plate system for arcade machines. And we played it on the Demule, DEMUL, Dreamcast / Naomi emulator, and it worked awesome. It looks awesome, it works awesome, but it's basically it's an arcade game. Like, if you were, like, think about you walking up to an arcade machine and you have 2 buttons and a joystick on either side. And in order to play against each other, you each have to stand on your side of the arcade machine, and then you start your virtual hoop session. And because of that, the controls in this game, and you would agree, are incredibly limited and primitive, because there's only a pass and shoot button and a reach in and jump button on defense. But man, the graphics are great. The nostalgia definitely sets in using those teams. The game is bright and full of life. The crowd is loud. It definitely feels like late 90s, early 2000s basketball. They did an amazing job of capturing that. And I didn't not have fun. Like, I thought the game was still fun, but it's definitely rough on the controls and limited from an animation perspective.
Great atmosphere, as you said. Just that feeling, the excited crowd, the announcer's voice and everything. Yeah, I love the atmosphere of the game. The gameplay is interesting. Interesting is one of those words, those euphemistic words that we use when a game is kind of rough but also kind of fun, which I would definitely say it is. It is a sim arcade hybrid, I would say, because you do have the 5-on-5, but it is definitely up-tempo, 2-minute quarters, not exactly realistic. You've got Eric Montross hitting very easily smoking turnaround fadeaways from 18 feet. And Montross was a better player than maybe a lot of people give him credit for, but not to the extent that he is in that game. It is definitely arcade-oriented in that respect. But the streamlined, simplified controls, again, very interesting that you're just dealing with these 2 buttons at that time, because at that time you're expecting certainly a 5-on-5 game to have more in-depth controls, but it is very simplified. And was I imagining things, or did both buttons pass in the backcourt?
I'm actually not sure. I'd have to put on the game and test that out. I do know that while the game leans in an arcade direction skill-wise, you know, like you stated, Montross being way too effective in the post and in the mid-range and whatnot, that I can't call it really an arcade pace, because there's no turbo button, and all the players, like on the fast break even, just kind of like slog up the court.
How do you drive? There's no explosiveness. Yeah.
There's no such thing as an explosive drive in that game. And there's no like unrealistic dunks. The dunks are very simulation style, right?
They're big
like
and powerful,
you're not going, you're not like jumping above the rim, right? With your feet at the rim and stuff. Right. So like, I guess I could agree that I think visually it can be looked at as a little arcade. I don't think the gameplay feels very arcade overall. I think that there's definitely some cool aspects of the game. Like, I think shooting a 3 and hitting it, or shooting an outside shot and hitting it, just feels really rewarding. Like those net physics. Yeah, like the swish and everything. And when you rattled a 3 in with Jerry Stackhouse, the rim mechanics and the net mechanics look awesome. I love hitting a shot in that game. I had a drive to the hoop with Jason Williams against you. I was using the Kings and Andrew was using the Pistons, and I kicked it out to Nick Anderson in the deep corner, and right off the catch I was able to go up into a 3, and it went nothing but net. And that the entire play felt awesome. There was also a play where I posted up Chris Webber on a pass from Jason Williams, and I went into a fadeaway, and sure, you did the exact same thing with Eric Montross and Christian Laettner earlier in the game, but still, it felt really good, and I was happy to be able to go to Chris Webber at that point. I also had a play where I swung the ball to the deep corner to Corliss Williamson, and I drove hard to the right, and it was one of the only driving finishes of our session on all 3 games. But I drove hard to the right, and I threw it right down on Eric Montross, and that dunk looked great. And that drive actually felt pretty good as well. And also there were some defensive plays, stealing the ball that I thought felt pretty good. You were dribbling down the court with Lindsey Hunter, and I was chasing you with Jason Williams. And I pushed the steal button, and I got a steal on you from behind. And then, I went the other way, and I thought that was cool to see. So, yeah, I mean, my opinion on it is very primitive controls-wise, but I do think that it makes the game very pick up and play. And I would even be open to doing a tournament on that game with the community if I could find some way to arrange that, because I think that the graphics are great. I think that all the courts for all 29 teams look awesome and accurate. I mean, they had the full NBA license. I like the fact that you can jump into the game like an arcade game and not worry about doing substitutions, right? Because there's only 5 players for each team, and you don't have to worry about, fouls. You don't have to worry about free throws. You're just hitting the virtual hardwood and using those primitive controls and trying to have fun. It reminds me of basketball video games in like the mid to late 80s and early 90s, where you were dealing with only a couple buttons that you could use, but you found a way to have fun with those games. So I recommend Virtua NBA. I still had a fun time.
Yeah, I definitely think it is that hybrid style. Reminds me a little bit of Konami's NBA in the Zone as far as having those shorter quarters and not being totally over the top, although I would say that NBA in the Zone has stronger gameplay. And one of the interesting things about Virtua NBA is the player movement, that it's kind of, I won't say on rails, but you are kind of being guided with the movement, and there's automatic switching. So that threw me a bit at first, but it does work, and you can see how that is made for those streamlined controls.
Yeah, that was one thing that I had to adjust to when I was first playing it, was the fact that they force you to guard the ball 100% of the time. So whoever has the ball, if they pass it, you're automatically switched to guard the next person who catches it. So in a way, that's kind of a relaxing way to play defense. If you could, you can't screw it up, Andrew, really. Yeah. Like it forces you to guard the person that has the ball. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. And just to let people know, the big draw to that game is the playoff structure. So basically what happens is you choose a team and you're thrown into a 16-team playoff scenario. And your job, whether you're playing against another person or against the CPU, is to get out of the first round, get out of the second round, and, basically make your way through the playoffs and win an NBA championship. And I think that the layout is really cool. Definitely a lot of nostalgia there related to the presentation. I also want to point out that Andrew and I also played a couple games of NBA Jam again for Super NES, and one of them we used Barkley and KJ, and we dismantled the Washington Bullets with Harvey Grant and Tom Googs Gugliotta. And I broke the backboard with Charles Barkley again. And I wanted to point out there was something really cool that happened in this game. And it is very rare to see this because of kind of the wacky and random nature of NBA Jam. All players had 15 points at halftime. So Barkley had 15 points, KJ had 15, Googs had 15, and Harvey Grant had 15, and the score was tied, obviously, 30-30. So, yeah, I might share that screenshot on social media platforms because that's not a common occurrence.
No, to get that much balance, I mean, obviously between two users playing co-op, that is more likely, I guess, but then to have it with the CPU and to have us tied at halftime and both all players scoring 15, yeah, that was definitely cool to see.
Yeah, and then we had a second game where we switched it up and used Dominique Wilkins and Stacey Augmon, using the Hawks. And we were versus the Clarence Weatherspoon, Jeff Hornacek 76ers, and it was probably our most dominating win yet. The bonus of using that Hawks team is that Stacey Augmon and Dominique Wilkins are both big players, as opposed to like KJ, who's a small player in that game. So Andrew was using Augmon. He can be a little bit more effective blocking shots and, even throwing it down and whatnot. Shoving, exactly. So, we had I think we both caught fire at one point in that game. And while Hornacek did hit a bunch of threes, including one around half court, we were able to dismantle that 76ers team as well.
It is funny when you say it out loud, but the most dominating win we've had by 5 points was going to be 7, but they did hit a shot at the buzzer to reduce the deficit to 5.
Well, it's that rubber banding, though, right?
It is,
because
yeah.
like when we were using the Hornets, against, I want to say it was the Timberwolves, we were up at one point. I was watching the footage back, 21-4, right? We were running away with that game, and then the computer started its cheating ways, and it was like tied by halftime.
Yeah, no, it is brutal. It does keep the scores close because, that rubber banding did help in the arcades as well when you have multiplayer, that you can have those competitive games. And there's been some really fun videos. Modern Vintage Gamer did a great video deep dive into the code and AI of the original NBA Jam, which we were playing, obviously, and goes into just how it works and the exact conditions. I need to go and watch that video again because it was very detailed, very interesting to see the exact circumstances where the CPU will just flick that switch and how it will come back. And usually it is firing up threes. Apparently there are 2 AI modes, and the one that we've been hitting so far is the one where the CPU just starts firing up threes and making them at a ridiculous clip. And ridiculous distances as well, Derek.
That was not one of my memories of NBA Jam growing up. I didn't remember how often the CPU would shoot a 3 from beyond half court.
Same.
Randomly. Like, not late in the shot clock, not under pressure, nothing like that. Like, just randomly firing. And the thing is with NBA Jam is oftentimes they'll hit that shot. So if it's in a close game and they make one of those, it will really piss you off.
Yeah.
And that's already happened to us a couple times. But it's really cool that NBA Jam has been a go-to for us again, because the game came out, over 30 years ago. And it really still is fun to play. And it was funny to play NBA Jam after playing Virtua NBA because of the freedom we had on the controls, right? Like, you go from Virtua NBA to NBA Jam and you realize that one of the biggest draws of NBA Jam was just how it felt to play the game, right? It's that how easy it is to move the players around the court, how fast and responsive the action is and whatnot. And while I do like Virtua NBA, the gameplay can't compete with the original NBA Jam.
Well, it's like I've said before, NBA Jam did set the standard for arcade games, and there were some admirable knockoffs, I suppose, some Jam clones, just as there were better Doom clones, and Duke Nukem 3D came along and did its own thing, and other first-person shooters, obviously, and some Jam clones were better than others, and NBA Street came along and did its own thing much more effectively, and found new ways to innovate in the arcade space. But the games that they erred by not following what NBA Jam did, not paying attention to why NBA Jam did things a certain way, the balance, the way you could get things done on both offense and defense. Obviously, it is very offense-oriented, NBA Jam. It is about jamming, about throwing down dunks and making threes, of course, but you can play defense. You need to play defense, so it has all of those basics right. It has the right balance. Rubber banding is frustrating, but it also does help the game be competitive, frustrating as it may be sometimes against the CPU, but also that very well-balanced on-fire mechanic. I mean, it is one of the most iconic power-ups in basketball video games and arcade games in general, I would argue, but it works so well. 3 shots to get on fire, then you lose it if your opponent scores. Then you're able to goaltend to prevent them from getting that basket. But then it goes out after 4 consecutive baskets that you've made, so it doesn't last too long. Just having that balance, and it may sound like an overused word, but across any games, and of course NBA 2K Online, NBA Jam, any multiplayer game, or any game against the CPU, balance is essential.
I'll also say this. The original NBA Jam is the hardest jam to stay on fire on. It's also the hardest to get block shots on. Yeah. So those two kind of go hand in hand. You can go an entire game on the original NBA Jam without getting one block. That's how hard it is.
Compare that to On Fire Edition. Yeah.
Yeah, compared to On Fire Edition, where there's never been a game probably in the history of that title where there wasn't at least 5 blocks, right? It's definitely easier to do on Jam, OFE, and you can stay on fire a lot longer on Jam OFE. NBA Jam, the original, I think, though, it makes it more of a challenge, right? Because really, you don't find a situation where you make a bunch of threes on fire. It's very rare. And that makes it so you have to use more strategy, more give and goes, take the right shots, make sure that you get closer to the basket sometimes in order to dunk the ball. And so they don't do like a finger roll, or so you don't get blocked, all of that stuff. I think that there's a lot of strategy involved in order to get wins on the original NBA Jam. And I think that's pretty cool.
And even just getting that third bucket to get on fire, the CPU does not want to give up that third consecutive bucket.
No. And I will say this, though. It's very easy to make them lose their fire, too.
Balance, again.
Like, it's very... Yeah, like, I don't think they've been able to keep it for more than one basket on us in the 6 or 7 games that we've played recently. Before we get to the main topic, which was suggested by Live01 legend Nate Stasio, I wanted to bring up another community question real quick that I asked, and I thought we got some good responses. And this question was inspired by the people over at NHL94.com. That's what their Twitter handle is. They still, to this day, and they've been doing it for decades, they still have local leagues and tournaments on the Sega Genesis version of NHL 94. And I just think that is so damn cool, Andrew.
That's dedication.
That they still do this. Yeah. They I believe they also do an online form of it, but they have people that show up and do these tournaments. They announce the results. They present that person with a trophy, all of that stuff. And like, it's just super cool. So my question for the community was, if you could choose one basketball video game, past or present, to have yearly tournaments and or leagues on with people from around the world with guaranteed participation, which game would it be? And the common choice was actually NBA Jam on Fire Edition, Andrew.
I mean, it makes sense. It's pick up and play. It's a fantastic game, one of the best arcade games ever made. My pick for the best arcade game ever made and the best NBA Jam game in the series by default. But now that we have some modding capabilities with it as well, yeah, just endless possibilities.
Yeah, I think NBA Jam on Fire Edition and or NBA Street Volume 2, maybe both, would be perfect for yearly tournaments and or leagues, because I think that there's a true skill gap with those games, and the games are just incredibly fun, and both are also very good pick up and play games. And Maz brought up that piece on our Discord. She said that whatever game is chosen, it should be a game that is skill based, and I think both of those are. Some of the other responses were the Live King mentioned NBA 2K7 hands down. He said it was the most fun couch co-op basketball game ever made, so he would like to see a tournament on that one. Tecmo Bowl stated NBA 2K1 for the Sega Dreamcast, which I'd love to get on the sticks with you on at some point. I know that he loves that game. He grew up with that game. He said he spent countless hours with his friend on that title. Brian in Chi stated College Hoops 2K8. As you know, that was a super successful tournament that I ran through the NLSC with people from around the world. There were 16 participants, and everybody just had a really good time. And those were really the responses. Wiscard Rush also had a vote in there for NBA Jam on Fire Edition. So did Shy Guy. And then, of course, the creator of the Legends on Fire Edition mod, Andrew, John Z1, stated that, it probably doesn't need to be said, but I strongly agree, Jam OFE for me. So, yeah, pretty cool responses there.
And just to share, Royce's answers from Facebook mentions NBA Street Volume 2 and NBA Jam on Fire Edition as the arcade games, NBA 2K11 through 14 and Live 06 for the sim or full 5-on-5. And I would definitely agree with those choices. And Street Volume 2 and NBA Jam on Fire Edition, they do seem like the ideal games because they are pick up and play, it's fast-paced action, there is that noticeable skill gap, but also a lot of highlights. It's a lot of fun, and that's something that Royce brings up, that there's a joy to that experience, that every moment there's something cool happening. And look, sim games are fun. I love sim games. You can create some fantastic highlights with sim games as well. Just look at the top 10 that you do every week, Derek. But arcade games, they have that fast-paced action. It is a highlight every play. You're going to see those great street ball moves every possession in NBA Street. You're going to see those high-flying dunks and swats, and hear Tim Kitzrow on the call in NBA Jam on Fire Edition. So the excitement is there every single possession.
Yeah, you want to get the most O's as you possibly can, right?
Yeah,
like you want to be able to have, those reactions. And look no further than when Stildo and I were competing in the NBA Jam on Fire Edition tournament, and he hit a game winner on me with Larry Bird. I want to say it was game 5 of that series. He was screaming. We were on the phone, and he was just absolutely screaming on the other end. And you have a lot more moments like that with games like NBA Jam on Fire Edition and NBA Street Volume 2. So, no, thank you to the community for the responses on that one.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at NBA-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So now to the main topic, Andrew. This was suggested by Live 01 legend Nate Stasho. So thank you for this topic suggestion. He asked, what basketball video game was it easiest and or hardest to achieve certain stat goals? And he gives examples like what games were hard to make 10 threes, or hard to get 8 steals, or easiest to get 6 blocks, and whatnot. And we had a couple community responses, but I know that you and I have some strong feelings on this. So why don't you start us off?
Well, if we can bring achievements into this as well, just as a quick aside, NBA Live 10 has some brutal ones related to overtime and double overtime, including hitting a game winner with Dwayne Wade in double overtime. That is one that you really need to set up to get to work properly. It is very tough. It also has a couple of statistical goals for the achievements as well. I think scoring 100 points is one of them. Indeed, it is. And scoring 100 points, and also the 81 points to match Kobe's 81-point game as well. One game that I always remember it being very hard to tally blocks in is NBA Live 97 for PC. And I remember playing a season with my cousin Clinton, and we were playing with the Suns. We made a couple of trades. We had Sean Kemp on the team. And I don't think, even playing 12-minute quarters, we couldn't get one player to average at least 1 block per game. You could alter shots, certainly, and get a lot of rebounds, but trying to get blocks in that game, just tally a couple of blocks per game. Nothing crazy like NBA Live 95. It's very easy to get blocks, for example. You can get a lot of blocks in Live 95 and 96. They toned it down for 97, but toned it down a little bit too much.
And that's frustrating when you're trying to have a sim season, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you want to see sim stats. So if somebody averages, 1.5, 2 blocks a game or something like that, you want to be able to achieve that, at least in the minimum, or at least get close to it in that season. So definitely frustrating. I do remember that about NBA Live 97. In fact, we connected on that recently, if you remember correctly, and that's when Grant Hill turned into Michael Jackson.
Of course.
So
wrong MJ.
That game does have So that game does have its issues. But before I list my first game here, what is the point of those achievements, Andrew? You stated the NBA Live 10, achieves. Is it just self-satisfaction? Like to complete them, or does it do anything for you? I never paid attention to achievements on consoles or like Steam achievements. Like they never really meant anything to me.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are fun challenges that you can attempt. They'll get you to set up different scenarios, do things that you might not normally do, push you towards a mode you might not necessarily play. So there is value in that respect. But apart from that, it's kind of just the dopamine rush of seeing the pop-up. Oh, you've done something. You've got some kind of achievement. I mean, if you want to call it a participation award, because some of them, some achievements and trophies are for very basic things, absolutely. So some of them aren't very special at all. But no, they did find with the achievements back in the 360 days that it did give people this rush to get some kind of pop-up. Oh, you've done something that you weren't expecting. So having this unexpected pop-up, oh, you've got some kind of trophy or achievement. There is that Pavlovian response to it, I guess. So, yeah, they persist to this day.
Yeah, I also remember that you could log in online on like the PlayStation 3 website or like the PlayStation website for PlayStation 3, and it would show all the games you played and how many achievements.
Oh, yeah. Well, it adds to the gamer score, so it kind of shows you, right. If you've got a big gamer score, it's like, oh, I'm a real gamer, right? Like, I've got a big gamer score. I've played a lot of games, I've done a lot of stuff in them. I guess is the.
We all know you're a real gamer, Andrew. We don't need that.
Yeah. Gamer TM #gamer. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So the first one I'm going to bring up is how easy blocks were in NBA Live 2004. The canned blocks are insane in that game, and my brother and I have been revisiting it a bunch over the last year. And just sometimes you can have 3 or 4 blocks on one possession, Andrew, because the ball just keeps getting shoved back into the offensive player's face. I think NBA Live 2004 is an amazing video game, but it can't be denied that there were kind of issues in their first implementation of 10-man freestyle.
Definitely.
Of those, their first year of, true 2-man animations. And I think that it just made blocks just that easy to get whenever somebody came down the lane.
I remember when we were devising sliders for more realistic gameplay, turning down the blocks was definitely one of the things to do. And they are already tuned down from NBA Live 2003, where you could swat pretty much everything to the opposite baseline very infamously in Live 2003. It does lean towards that sim arcade hybrid style, the closest to an arcade game that Live has come, I would suggest, but definitely an issue with 2004. I mean, it is fun, obviously, but as far as being a realistic sim game, the blocks definitely needed to be tuned down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we had a season, my brother and I, co-op, where we were averaging over, 12 blocks a game in 12-minute quarters with a player. So that's how you know when blocks are overpowered. So what's your next one?
Satisfying, though. I mean, to get those swats and to send them off the board as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's satisfying, but at the same time, I felt like I never had that much control over the blocks, right? Because you're dragged to the offensive player. So it's not something like I stated on a prior show. One of the things I'm really appreciating about NBA Live 15 and Live 16 right now is the fact that none of the blocks feel canned. Like if I time a block, whether it's on a layup or a shot or blocking a dunk, I controlled that entire sequence, right? So it's like night and day different than Live 2004 in that way.
So I kind of have a few games to mention here. It's more of a mode, I guess, but my career, once you've leveled up your player, once you've maxed out your player, once you really know how to pad your stats, getting triple doubles or even quadruple doubles with a versatile point guard is quite easy. Once you know how to roam properly on defense to snag those extra rebounds, I love my assists, Derek, and the NLSC Thrill Home members also know how much I love my assists as well. And once you know how to do that and pad your stats, you can get triple-double after triple-double. In year 6 of my 2K14 My Career, I do have a career average of a triple-double. Seasons 2 through 5, every year I've been averaging a triple-double, and I've got several quadruple-doubles as well. I don't say this to say that I am a master of the game, that I'm the best gamer of all time. Gamer TM, obviously. But once you know how to pad stats, and it becomes habit like that, it's ridiculously easy to do so, but at the same time, it's a fun challenge.
And keep winning. And keep winning,
course,
right?
Absolutely.
Like that's the thing. I've seen your scores and everything, and your record and stuff. So you're able to do that without sacrificing the W.
Without compromising the win, absolutely. So once you develop those habits, it becomes very ingrained that this 6th season, I'm actually not averaging a triple-double. That being said, only because I'm a shade under it. I think I'm about half a rebound under a triple-double on the 6th season because I've not been trying as hard, trying to break that habit kind of just for something different to not lead the league in every statistical category. But again, once you do get used to padding the stats, it is very easy. I've also found that 2K14 PS4 is much easier to get steals in compared to some other games. And that might be because I'm mostly playing my career in that game, and I've got a my player that has a signature skill, the pickpocket signature skill that is leveled up to level 3. It gives you a 100% increase on the ability to knock the ball loose, so it is overpowered, to say the least. So in any game where you do have an overpowered badge, and 2K19 had some overpowered badges as well, or signature skills, as the case may be, depending on the game. So once you have maxed out your player, if you do min-maxing, if you do know how to build an OP player, then putting up stats in my career is, it is very easy. It's harder to not put up great stats, especially on 12-minute quarters.
If anybody wants to say, well, I bet you can't do that in the newer games, look no further than Chris Smoove, who posted his NBA 2K24 My Career stats. I think he just won his 6th championship. And he averaged 90 points, over 20 rebounds, and over 20 assists a game.
Yeah.
So just a reminder that I think that experiencing the newest 2Ks, I think you can even find more exploits than some of the older games and even get bigger stats. At least that's what I've found, because a lot of the legacy issues are still there, and then there's new issues, right? So, look no further than that. Now, obviously, Chris Smoove is a My Career legend, but trust me, if you know where the exploits are, you can do something very similar to what he was able to do.
Plus, also, you have green releases now. In 2K14, you do have that dice roll, even on the excellent release, so I will miss wide-open shots from time to time that are well-timed, because there are no guaranteed makes in 2K14, with jump shots anyway. So these days, with green releases,
I want to point out he shot over 80% from the field.
Yeah.
Also, over 80% from the field and over 70% from 3.
Master the mechanics, so you can do it, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Because the exploits. So, good point there. So the next one I'm going to bring up is NBA 2K13, and this is a case for the hardest to do something. I'd say it's one of the hardest games to get blocks in, mainly because almost all layups are auto-adjusted by the game, and it's pretty impossible to block dunks. So you can be in there with a top-tier defender, right? And somebody can be charging down the lane, and you time your jump at exactly the same time they do. It's a perfectly timed block. And the game will force that layup into an auto adjustment where he goes around your arm. And he might miss it, he might make it, but that block that you perfectly timed, no way, like you're not going to get it. And also, I've shown screenshots of this in the past. There's so many cases where they will go in for a dunk and you will time it perfectly and your hand goes through the ball and they just dunk it on you. Like your hand is inside the ball. You timed that perfectly. You got that block, but the game just wouldn't allow it. So I'd say that NBA 2K13 is definitely one of the hardest games to record blocks on.
Easily. And on the flip side of that, it's one of the easiest ones in my career, especially, to go up and dunk every time and dominate that way.
Exactly. So what's your next one?
So scoring in Live 06 for PC or PS2 when you have outside scorer freestyle superstars. When all else fails, drive to the rim and do one of the outside freestyle superstars layups. Now, obviously, they're outside scorers. Really, it's more of a slasher wing player. Freestyle superstars is really what it should be, because you also have the inside moves as well, the up and under layups, the putting the ball behind your back before going in for the layup. And that is the way to really spam your way to high scores. I got 92 points in a game with Ben Gordon, even though I only hit 1 3 in that game. Wasn't shooting well from 3 with him, 1 of 10, actually, but scored 92 points because just going to the rim with him and hitting those freestyle superstars moves, cheesing it to outscore Kobe in that game. And yeah, that is definitely an easy way to score in Live 06 prior gen.
Yeah, freestyle superstars is super overpowering. It makes it fun for posterizing dunks, right? And flashy moves and everything, but it definitely is a little bit too dominant over the defense. My next one I'm going to bring up is actually going back to the easiest to do something. NBA 2K19, getting steals. That ball is so damn loose, Andrew. That ball might be the most loose in basketball video game history. You can brush by that ball and the offensive player will drop it and you're headed the other way. Also, quite a few passes in that game kind of like teleport to the defense.
Yeah.
It's very easy to intercept passes. If somebody tries to throw the ball down the court off of a rebound, let's say you're playing in the broadcast view and it's, most of the players are off screen all the way down the other end, the majority of the time it's going to be picked off. But it's not uncommon for 10 plus steal games to happen on NBA 2K19 because of the ball being so loose.
And I think they've gone too far the other way in recent games where poking it loose too often is a press steal to foul situation. So they've kind of overcompensated. I would say that 2K23, 2K24 are some of the hardest games, in my experience at least, to get steals where you really should get steals.
Any game that's press steal to foul are the hardest to get steals.
Easily, yeah.
To be honest with you. So what's your next one?
So we mentioned the blocks in Live 2004. I would also say the blocks in Live 2003 are very easy to get as well, but they are the hardest to keep in bounds.
Yeah, because they tried to make every block or most every block huge, right?
Massive.
In order to initiate that funny courtside comedy scene that you love so much.
Of course.
Yeah, I think NBA Live 2003, it's way too easy to block outside shots, which is very unrealistic. How often do outside shots get blocked in an NBA game? But you can easily time blocks on shooters on the outside and send that ball sailing past half court. So I definitely agree with that one. Let's get to rebounds, Andrew. So NBA Live 2002, definitely the hardest to get rebounds possibly in basketball video game history because you have to let the ball hit the floor the majority of the time. You can't jump. If you jump for a rebound in NBA Live 2002, you have now put yourself at a disadvantage, which is completely the opposite of the way rebounding works.
Yeah.
Yeah. In real life, whether it's in the NBA or pickup or whatever. But it's basically, it's very common for your big guys in that game to not be your leader in rebounds because sometimes the ball needs to hit the floor and your big guy by that time is not getting to the ball. So it's a forward or a guard that will pick it up. But yeah, NBA Live 2002, terrible rebounding mechanics.
Some of the worst in the series, absolutely. And the ratio was off as well, that most of its offensive rebounds, if you jump, you've really got to anticipate it hitting the floor, scoop it up as the defender. So if you do jump, it is going to fall to the offensive player. I remember in my Live 2002 franchise with the Kings, Chris Webber was averaging double-digit rebounds in 12-minute quarters, but I want to say that at least half of them were at the offensive end. And look, there have been players who have averaged 3 to 5 offensive boards, but they've usually averaged, most of them, not all of them, but they've usually averaged 7, 8, 9 at the other end. It's mostly been defensive boards that that's made up their big rebounding numbers. Your Ben Wallace's, etc. You have those big offensive rebounding numbers, but they are mostly defensive boards that they're grabbing. The ratio was completely off in 2002, thanks to the fact that if you jump, you're at a disadvantage, which is just ridiculous. 2001 was kind of that way as well, but 2002 was particularly bad.
Yeah, 2002 was somehow worse than 2001 from a rebounding standpoint. So I have one more to discuss. What about you?
Well, on the subject of 2002, of course, driving is very easy in that game. You could just go in and dunk all day.
Yeah, I also think that the random alley-oops can sometimes be overpowering, where they're just so unexpected and whatnot. I think that, you're on the topic of scoring. The original NBA in the Zone for PlayStation is one of the most overpowering for scoring and high field goal percentages. You and I connected on that. The lateral movement is so poor in that title, and the offensive players are so much faster than the defensive players in that regard, that you will find yourself in a game that is supposed to be it's a sim arcade hybrid, but it's supposed to be more leaning sim, Andrew, right?
Yeah.
It's it's got all the NBA teams, it's all deep rosters, all of that stuff, season mode, etc. But it's not uncommon to have the large majority of all points in NBA in the Zone be dunks. And I mean, not just dunks, like flashy dunks, like going behind the back in the air, right? 360s, all that stuff. And it doesn't matter the player either, because I remember absolutely torching somebody with Chris Mullin dunking from all over the floor. So I think if you want to talk about a game that's super dominant from a scoring perspective, it's way too easy to score. I would say the original NBA in the Zone, and they definitely cleaned that up with NBA in the Zone too.
And if we're talking about exploits and so forth, we need to pay homage to the original double dribble, getting threes. That corner three exploit in double dribble is infamous.
Yeah, I mean, most people that played that game that knew about that had a rule.
Yeah,
you are not to go to that corner.
House rules,
right? And we're going to have a truly competitive game. And actually, what's funny is when we were playing Virtua NBA, I had some double dribble feels, not because of the exploit, but just because of the primitive controls.
Yeah,
right. It was basically Andrew and I running up court, and because you can only you have a pass button and a shoot button, it's just trying to find the best angle for a shot, shooting, and then going the other way. So it's kind of double dribble vibes playing that game.
Also want to throw out an interesting one. ESPN NBA Tonight, which we played some time back, trying to get assists in that game, because we had a lot of passes that should have been tallied as assists, but we looked at the end of the game and only had 2 or 3.
Yeah, you know, another one that's kind of frustrating in relation to that is NBA Live 2000. Why? Because when goaltends happen, they don't count as assists in that game. So my brother and I, in a game, we would shoot for like a triple-double with a player, and like the last 2 baskets that were scored off that player's passes were goaltended, and they weren't counted as assists. There's also a frustrating one related to stats that is in the majority of 90s titles and early 2000s titles, is where if a player, in real life, if a player is blocked and you pick up the ball, that's a rebound, right? That's a rebound in the real stats, and the real stat book. From my understanding, it always has been that way. But for example, in a game like NBA Live 2000, you can block somebody and then pick up the ball, and it does not count as a rebound. So that's another statistical thing that happens in past video games.
Yeah, any game that has something weird about how stats are tallied. There's also, again, going back to my career and the connected modes, I missed out on a bunch of assists because the teammate grade said it was a bad pass, usually because the defender got a finger on it, but it still ended up with the recipient. But it was counted as a bad pass, so it completely negated the assist, when in any real game, the statistician is calling that an assist.
Right, but I also think that there's some gray area there. I think that you're not supposed to count that as an assist. I think if the ball is tipped, that the assist is thwarted. I'd have to look that up. But I see what you're saying, though. Like, I think most statisticians would call it an assist. But yeah, that's it for us, Andrew. Let's get to the community responses.
Yeah, and first up is Bucky T says, honestly for me, it was the hardest to get double-doubles in the rebound category in NBA 2K14, Xbox 360, PS3 version. Rebounding was a big weakness in 2K14 in those versions. In 2K17, it was the easiest to get stats across the board, in my opinion. And I found that 2K17 was pretty easy in my career. Once again, once you upgrade a mic player to an OP level, it is very easy to put up stats according to your archetype. And again, get triple-doubles once you know how to pad stats effectively. But yeah, rebounding in 2K14, would you say that's been your experience?
Kind of, actually. My brother and I have actually talked about this. And we think that the best rebounding in 2K basketball video game history started in NBA 2K16. It was also in NBA 2K17, and it's a little bit in there in NBA 2K19 as well, but we believe that the best rebounding mechanics in the franchise's history and the best ball detection, like hand-to-ball detection mechanics, were in 2K16 and 2K17. On NBA 2K14 for PS3, Xbox 360, but also for Xbox One and PS4, there's many instances that I found where you'll jump for a rebound, and instead of your hand going to the ball, because the ball is like right near your hand, any player would just grab that. The ball just kind of bounces off of your guy's arm or something, or it goes down to the court, etc. So I would agree that the rebounding is not as good in NBA 2K14 for any gen. in comparison to 2K16 and 2K17 for PS4, Xbox One. But I wouldn't say that, in my opinion, it's some of the worst in the franchise's history. I still think it's competent, but yeah, it's not as strong as those two titles.
I will actually also throw out NBA Live 09 PS3 360 as an honorable mention for difficult rebounds. You do have that can moment where you do that little hop, and it's quite obvious that your player is not going to grab the rebound, that you've not hit the button early enough. You don't even make an attempt for it. And I've been playing some Live 09 recently and quite enjoying it. Leave that for another show to get into deeper, but I will throw that out there as another honorable mention as kind of a canned rebounding moment that sometimes you don't grab rebounds that you should, and they did fix that in Live 10.
I can agree with that because we connected on NBA Live 09 using the PS3 emulator, and we had that experience, the frustrating rebounding. So I definitely agree there.
And jumping over to our Facebook page now, Royce once again says he's going to go with Showdown 94 and mentions getting 55 points with Sean Kemp, but taking a lot of effort to get those buckets. Easiest, he would say, NBA Street Volume 2 and NBA Jam on Fire Edition. Also, Live 2001 and 2003, a player can get a lot of big-time stats. Mentions that he still loves games where it's difficult to get stats because it's still a great experience and great challenge. And I agree. It's only really frustrating when it feels like the mechanics don't let you get the stats you should, or there's a bug with the way the stats are accumulated, the way they're counted. I'll also throw out Live 06. As much as I love Live 06 PC, that every deflection out of bounds counts as a turnover. That's frustrating.
Yeah, that's not a good one. Yeah, I can agree with him there. I think that it takes a little bit away of the feeling of the achievement, right? When it's too easy to do. It's like the issue with NBA 2K17 where the defender, it's a glitch they never fixed with any patch, but the defender on the fast break who's like he's a wing defender, he just moves out of the way, like he's completely out of position, and you can just exploit it and run to the hoop and throw it down. How often are you going to feel good about that, right? About
easy.
Getting that free bucket, because anybody can do it, right? I'd like to get stats that I feel good about, that that I had to work hard for, that maybe I had to play smart to get, et cetera, or play realistic to get. So I definitely agree with him there.
And as he mentions, in Showdown 94, you have to work for every basket because you don't have a sprint control. It is tougher to get to the basket. There's a lot of charging calls. We found that when we played Showdown 94 ourselves, and people who play that game know it very well. Those early basketball games where you don't have a sprint control, hey, we just saw it in Virtua NBA as well. It is harder to drive, so you don't get those easy buckets.
Now, I will say this, NBA Showdown 94, the best version by far is that Sega Genesis version. Because the players move faster, they move more fluid. I prefer it far more than the Super Nintendo version. I think that games like NBA Showdown for Super NES, Bulls versus Blazers, Lakers versus Celtics, all of those games are very similar in the way where they're just kind of a slogfest. They're very slow. The players all move at the same speed. It's the gameplay is so basic that I think sometimes today it kind of puts me to sleep, right? It's hard for me to get engaged in that action. But if you get into like the Sega Genesis version of NBA Showdown, or like the mid 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, those basketball games, that's when they kind of figured it out, right? Basketball is fast paced and fun, right? It's a beautiful game. And, most of those games ended up having a sprint control. Virtua NBA didn't. We noticed that. But most of those games did end up having a sprint control and fast-paced, fun basketball action. So, sometimes it's hard for me to go back and play games like, NBA Showdown and Bulls versus Blazers and whatnot.
I mean, as much as we love retro gaming, some titles do show their age.
They do. Even a game, honestly, on NES plays better. Like, I think Tecmo NBA Basketball for NES, I think has a better, more fun pace than Bulls versus Blazers and Lakers versus Celtics and whatnot. So I think the pace really matters when it comes to basketball video games.
Definitely does. And jumping over to the Discord for a few more responses now, Maz mentions Live 2004's blocks. Pep says blocks in Live 2003 also easy but much funnier, which they certainly were. Maz also mentions the incredible sound effect just made them memorable, even if they weren't actually easier. Just the those big booming blocks, obviously, in Live 2003. Shy Guy mentions the shoves in NBA Jam on Fire Edition.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the steals in NBA Jam on Fire Edition are a little bit overpowering, and I actually had that on my list to talk about. So if you noticed when we connect and we play on the road trip, and it doesn't matter if I'm using Gary Payton or Julius Erving or whatnot. Obviously, Gary Payton's a little bit better at him, but how many times do I get a backcourt steal in those games?
Oh, you've got it down to a science, yeah.
I got it down to a science, right? I can get it's not uncommon for me to get like 20 or 30 steals, right, in a game, and I'm constantly picking the computer's pocket. It's not even the shove, right? Because in my opinion, that's not as effective as just swiping for the steal. I am just constantly getting swipe steals on that game. And it's just so much different of an experience than playing the original NBA Jam, which we've been doing for the Super NES, because in that game, you have to shove, basically, right, to jar the ball loose. How many times do you see an on-ball steal with a swipe in the original? So it's definitely different in that way. But yeah, I think that that's one of the weaknesses of NBA Jam OFE from a competitive perspective when you're playing against the CPU. Because if you're playing against another human, they can avoid that better, right? But when you're playing against the CPU, they'll honestly just run into it sometimes, and you can get 20 to 30 on-ball steals pretty easily in a game.
Yeah, I'm the shover in our duo. I'm the one that's doing all the shoving, basically. And also, as a way to set a pick.
We plow the roads for each other.
It's
basically.
True, yeah. It's a great way to step an alley-oop, absolutely. And shoving is definitely easy in On Fire Edition. It will punish you if you mistime it and they just blow by you to the rim, but if you do shove effectively in the front court, in their back court, then you definitely can get some cheap and quick turnovers that way. And I do think that they did make it a bit easier to just swipe the ball with the steal button in Tournament Edition, the follow-up to the original NBA Jam, but yeah, shoving was where it was at.
Yeah, in NBA Jam on Fire Edition, it's not a pick and roll, it's a shove and roll.
Yeah.
And we execute that pretty damn well.
But thank you to everybody who responded to that question. These things, they just stick in your mind, don't they, Derek? When you're an enthusiastic gamer, you just know these mechanics so well. You remember all the little foibles of the different games, where it was easy to get stats, where it was tough to get rebounds in Live 2002, the games where you could just knock down threes easily or dominate with the special moves like Freestyle Superstars in 06. They just stick in your mind, and they become part of our fondest memories, but also some of our most frustrating ones as well.
Yeah, and there's many games that we didn't bring up, right? Like, we could have brought up free throws, like in NBA Inside Drive 2003, those terrible free throw mechanics,
that's
right?
Awful, yeah.
Or, like, how hard it is to hit free throws, ridiculously, stupidly hard, and silly mechanics in the early 2Ks with those green arrows and the bumper controls, right? So, like, there's definitely a lot more games we could have brought up, but we would have been on here for 5 hours. So, I know you love the NLC podcast, my friends, but 5 hours, that's a long show.
It's that show business thing. You've got to leave them wanting more, Derek. And we are so grateful that so many people love basketball games as much as we do, and thank you for tuning in each and every week.
Yeah, and thank you for responding to all of my mailbag questions. I do have a trivia out there related to NBA 2K9 ratings, and I'm still waiting on a few responses to that, but once we get a few more, we'll discuss it on the show.
I've been holding off playing 2K9, actually, so that I don't accidentally see some ratings and cheat.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be hard because these trivias are not easy. Like, this trivia involves, naming the top 10 point guards going by overall in NBA 2K9, and it is, like, to tell you how hard this is, Devin Harris is one of them, because he had like a 20-point a game season with the Nets. But yeah, it's not an easy trivia.
Got to remember the season, the players, and the way players were rated in those games. And sometimes the answers are not as obvious as you think.
Exactly.
But we will circle back to that. In the meantime, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Please join us again each and every week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us and, of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Maybe you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. You can also find me on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. On YouTube, we're at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.